At this point, I would like to hand over to Ms. Leanne Pear of 21st Century Educators. She's going to be giving us an informative and interactive presentation on reimagining education, a 21st century perspective. Leanne, I'll leave you to take control.
Hello, and thank you very much, Danelle.
Okay.
Right, so welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us in this very important session as we look at digital skills in education today. But before we jump in, let me introduce myself briefly. My name is Leanne Pear, and I have been teaching all my adult life. I've also trained several teachers in ICT, and I am the director and founder of 21st Century Educators, which aims to change education one educator at a time. And of course, probably my most important job is being a mommy to my 9-year-old twin there, Aaron and Alex. So today, we want to talk about reimagining education from a 21st century perspective. But let's first start by defining what the word reimagine means. So according to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, to reimagine is to think about again, especially in order to change or to improve. So to look at it again, take another glance. But why do we need to reimagine education? Well, the case for change is always a question of purpose. To reimagine what education can be, we must first question, what is it for? And of course, societal changes have certainly always brought new challenges for schools. The education system as we currently know it is only about 200 years old. Before that, formal education was really reserved for the elite. But as industrialization changed the way we work, it created the need for universal schooling. And back then, factory owners required docile, agreeable workers who would show up on time and do what their managers told them. That sounds familiar, right? Just like the classroom. We sit in the classroom all day and the teacher tells the student what to do. But the Industrial Revolution created jobs that had never existed before, also similar to today. And now that we are moving into a new post-industrial era, it is worth reflecting on how our education evolved to suit factory work and to check to see if this model actually still makes sense. And we can all agree that this current model is not sufficiently preparing our students to face their current and future challenges. I mean, students now have access to unlimited information, constantly changing technology, global warming, economic crises, and of course, our most recent disruptor, COVID-19. And with any new challenge comes the need to re-examine our current approaches to education. In the Caribbean context, we can say primarily our education system looks at academic attainment from standardized tests to determine what's a success and what's a failure. And we can also say that this system is currently not adequately equipping our students for their future because although the society is rapidly changing, schools are evolving much slower and not really accommodating the needs. And of course, COVID-19 actually highlighted this even more. 1 year later, and schools for the most part, even where there's a plethora of technology present, are still struggling. So what does our education system need to do? Well, let's talk a little bit about some projections. Currently, we're saying that an estimated 75 million of jobs will be displaced worldwide through automation between 2018 and 2022. However, 133 million new roles may emerge. 85% of jobs that today's learners will be doing in 2030 haven't been invented yet. That's just 9 years away. 77% of employers don't think graduates are adequately prepared for the workforce. 42.5% of recent graduates were underemployed in 2018. And by 2030, again 9 years away, in-the-moment learning will become the modus operandi, and the ability to gain new knowledge will be valued higher than the knowledge people already have. So in this uncertain, interconnected, rapidly changing world, there's actually a demand for human skills. 92% of employers actually rated soft skills as critical priority. And we're going to talk about those soft skills. And 67% of HR managers actually stated that they would hire a candidate with strong soft skills, even if the so-called hard skills were weak and you can check out that for more information. So what does this data tell us? It tells us that we need an education system which is able to produce students who can innovate and create solutions for problems and jobs which do not even exist yet. And while there are teachers, schools, and programs running ahead and embracing these needed changes, they're often doing it despite the broader educational system rather than because of it. So where do we start in terms of reimagining education? How do we dismantle systems which have existed for hundreds of years? How do we deliberately shift from an over-reliance on standardized tests towards the acquisition of these needed 21st century skills? I mean, how do we implement certain core competencies such as collaboration, digital literacy, critical thinking, and problem solving that everyone is saying that schools need to teach in order for our students to thrive in today's world? Is it that we just need to add more technology to the classroom or just spend more money on buying resources? I mean, we can sit here and talk about all that is not working in education and why change is so difficult. But I want to say one of the answers in dismantling this current system lies within reimagining the role of the teacher. If you are in the business of educating others, you need to understand the changes and evolve. Doing so will be good for you, your students, and the society. And it certainly, for me, is one of the keys to future-proofing education. And I really like this quotation by J.K. Rowling. We do not need magic to change the world. We carry all the power we need inside ourselves already. We have the power to imagine better. And at 21st Century Educators, we have been actually looking at how a multi-tiered interactive professional development could be implemented in order to prepare teachers for future-ready schools. So some of our strategies has been to look at the trends, do the research, implement professional learning in a myriad of formats ranging from workshops, webinars, coaching, social media collaboration, communicating, and problem solving in order to create transformative teachers and to ensure that the end goal is not just to get students with good grades, but rather to focus on the whole child's development. We have also focused on introducing ICT integration in the classroom because we do understand that technological advances offer novel affordances in order to engage learners. However, the need to improve the digital skills of our teachers must be grounded on the understanding of the need for evolving pedagogies and content. Otherwise, for me, technology will just remain a tool and not bring significant benefit to the teachers or the students. Digital skills must always be grounded in what are the goals we want to achieve, and it should enhance our way in getting there rather than hinder it. These digital skills must be built within a holistic framework so that educators become empowered to lead the charge of this transformation. You know, sometimes we spend so much time thinking about and focusing on the macro picture, which we often have no control over, that we forget the power of the individual. However, it must be a deliberate, thoughtful process based on research, cultural applicability, and the needs of the teacher. It must also be interactive and carefully implemented. And there must be an iterative process because we need to check to see if it's working and what is working and what's not. So our development of teachers must be data-driven. And that does not mean the numbers of persons who attended a PD session. To have impact, professional learning needs to be sustained. Teachers need to become lifelong learners. Teachers must have a space to collaborate, which is not limited by geographical or time boundaries. Time needs to be actually crafted to ensure that teachers network and build a system which works for both their current students as well as those entering the system in the future. So the question is, how do we begin reimagining and deliberately transforming educators to be 21st century educators in future-ready schools? Well, we're going to take a look at one of the most well-known examples in nature. We're going to talk about how does the butterfly transform. So we're going to talk a little bit of science now. So let's start with the caterpillar. So in this stage of the butterfly's life, which follows right after hatching from an egg, The main task that the caterpillar does is to consume food. The caterpillar's purpose is simply to eat as much as possible in order to fuel the growth that will take place in the future. During this stage, the caterpillar actually will outgrow itself and shed its skin as many as 4 or 5 times. So how does this relate to educators? Well, as educators, we need to be lifelong learners. We need to ensure that our skills do not become outdated. We need to continue reinventing ourselves so that the needs of the society do not outgrow what we need to give to our students. And we need to shed some of those ideas that we have about education as well. Let's be flexible and adapt. It is not always going to be the same. We need to adopt new understandings of pedagogy within the context of technology. We need to pay attention to trends in the world and situate our charges to face these changes. We can't have our students consume knowledge for now, because they too must be able to shed their skin to adapt to their constantly changing world. And they are not going to be able to do so unless they become knowledge producers through the so-called soft skills, which true 21st century education brings. So let's move on now to the chrysalis stage. So this is actually probably one of the most fascinating stages of the butterfly development, because when the little crawler is fully grown and it can't eat anymore, it simply just dangles from a branch and spins a protective cocoon around itself, so it can safely rest and digest all the food that has been consumed in the previous stage. And though the chrysalis appears unchanged from the outside during this stage, there's actually dramatic transformation taking place inside, because the body of the caterpillar actually is slowly dissolving, while the previously dormant precursor cells of the emerging butterfly, which is actually called imaginal cells, which I found quite interesting, gradually develop, migrate together, and create a brand new being. So how does this apply to education? For me, this signifies that sometimes, we expect the changes in education to come from the external, the powers that be, the ministries of education, the governments, etc. And while that would make life much easier if the managers of these systems made the needed shift, for me, it is not impossible for the shifts to come from within. Because the most common way people give up their power is by thinking they don't have any. Each individual teacher doing his or her part in the classroom and bringing the needed transformation together with other like-minded colleagues, like those imaginal cells which move together, it will eventually force a brand new thing to emerge. So don't underestimate your ability to create transformation. And then finally, we move to the beautiful butterfly. So at last, in this final stage, the fully developed butterfly is ready to emerge from the chrysalis. After breaking free, the butterfly's wings are actually still folded and wet, and more rest time is necessary to allow blood to flow into the wings. And finally, when the unfurled wings are fully dry, the butterfly is ready to take flight and share its beauty with the world. But during this stage, there is actually an intentional breaking free that has to occur with proper timing before flight is undertaken. And for me, this signifies that teacher development must be intentional and based on the needs of the teacher, the school, and the society at large. Even when we consider the implementation of digital skills, it must not be rushed and haplessly implemented. We need to ensure that it is sustainable and that there is sufficient support for the teacher. That means providing the time for professional development to take place within the teacher's schedule. That means networking with colleagues around the world. That means creating new knowledge as we discuss and collaborate on social media platforms. So, are you ready for transformation? So thank you very much. That is the end of my presentation. Just a reminder that you too can become a caterpillar to a butterfly.